Denver says it can't do this anymore, can't shelter and feed the number of migrants coming from the southern border.
That support is going to become insufficient very quickly.
Take a look at Cherry River today, the waterway formerly known as Cherry Creek. Love the rain, hate the potential for flooding. A closer look at mayoral candidate Mike Johnston's claims about leadership on several tough issues. And new rules for utility bills because of the issues you heard about here on Next. Denver is considering scaling back the services that it provides to all the migrants coming here from the southern border as their numbers seem to increase. There's now hundreds coming every day. The city is asking the federal government for help and not getting a whole lot. Our Angeline McCall was able to ask the mayor some questions about this today as the city's preparing for more migrants with the federal immigration policy change that happens tomorrow.
Right. The city has already spent $16 million. Only a little more than $900,000 of that has been reimbursed by the federal government, meaning the city is largely carrying the burden of this cost.
Denver cannot continue to financially shoulder this burden alone. Our reserves are not bottomless, and if this situation extends for a prolonged period of time, some hard choices are going to have to be made. And to be clear, my team and I are already beginning to talk about service cuts.
Today, already shifts in services with the intake center moved to a new location from the Auraria campus. Another shelter has also been added. At this time, the city is not going to reopen rec centers as emergency shelters, and they are redirecting those who have not encountered immigration to local resources. We met one family at the intake center who was in that position who told us they were given a paper with local shelters to go to, and they were waiting for help from a local nonprofit. So far, the city says that no one at this time has been left on the street without any resources.
I think the worst thing we could have is migrants who come into our city who also will end up on our streets. And we are doing everything we can to hold that dike from breaking and having an even greater crisis of people on housing in our community. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor Hancock says cities are not designed for this, that they need help more from the federal government. Despite pleading with them, Hancock says there's still no action from Congress or those in Washington, D.C.
I wonder, Angela, I mean, you've talked to more of these folks coming into our community than most people have. Do you get the sense that if Denver offered fewer services, that fewer people would come here?
Well, I do remember talking to one guy when I was down in El Paso, and he wanted to come to Denver, and he specifically told me that he was coming to Denver because he heard that it was a welcoming place, that it was a sanctuary city, and so he was hoping to get there because he heard that there were resources. So now, you know, knowing that fewer resources could occur here in the next few months, that could definitely change people's desire to come here. But we've also seen people, on the other hand, who they just know that they need to get somewhere out of Texas and outside of border towns. And simply, Denver is affordable to get to from places like El Paso. It's a simple bus ticket, and it's really inexpensive in comparison to other destinations to go.
The answer, like a lot of this, is complicated. All right, Angeline, thank you very much. So another wrinkle with the city's response. In just a few hours, pandemic-era restrictions that limit who can seek asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border are going to expire. This is Title 42 that we've talked so much about. Critics argue that lifting Title 42 is going to lead to an influx of migrants crossing the border. Homeland Security doesn't dispute that, and they say the next few weeks could be chaotic and that border agents could be seeing as many as 10,000 crossings a day. The Biden administration is trying to get the word out that stricter regulations are going to come in behind Title 42.
If anyone arrives at our southern border after midnight tonight, they will be presumed ineligible for asylum and subject to steeper consequences for unlawful entry.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who said that when Title 42 expires, the U.S. is going to go back to prior immigration law, which requires harsher penalties for illegal border crossings, like a minimum 5-year ban on legal reentry. The Biden administration also issued new rules this week that will require migrants to seek asylum in the countries that they pass through before they get to the U.S. border. So that's everybody but Mexicans at the southern border. And the U.S. is also setting up an online process for people seeking asylum. House Republicans today passed a bill to resume construction of the border wall and to require asylum seekers to wait in Mexico for court hearings. In the unlikely event that that bill passes the Democrat-controlled Senate, President Biden has already said he would veto that. The weather just kept weathering on us today. Yesterday was the main attraction. Today, the hail and the tornadoes have moved out to the far, far eastern edge of Colorado. Front Range just got buckets of rain. By 2 o'clock this afternoon, enough rain had fallen to make today Denver's wettest day in 2 years. Creeks and streams are running high. Northeast Colorado, including the entire Denver metro area, is under a flood watch through late tonight. Out east, Adams County way, there are a number of roads closed due to flooding. There were cars that got stuck in floodwaters in Bennett and Strasburg. And closer to the city, Commerce City police say they're watching for flooding along Highway 85. Confluence Park, not exactly friendly to go wading today. This is a look at what was happening there about 2 hours ago. The Cherry Creek kayak path has replaced the spot where bikes were rolling yesterday. The creek is now 1 foot away from minor flood stage at its highest crest in 8 years. It is something to watch. Cherry Creek through the city, Danielle, but of course anybody who's been around for a while knows, of course, that is a flood control device. It is where the water can safely rise and we can watch it and say, ooh, wow, that water's really high, but it means that the flood control structure's doing its job. It's not in neighborhoods.
Absolutely. It's incredibly impressive. Plus, nice to see that no bikes are out there or anything. Tough to get through on a night like tonight. You guys, we have not seen a day like today in about 2 years. This much water. This is the wettest May 11th that we have seen here in Denver, and our storm total between yesterday and today, more than 2.5 inches out at DIA. We are breaking records left and right, and we have already surpassed our average May rainfall, what we see for the entire month. Like Kyle said, that flood watch in place through tonight, the I-25 corridor off to the eastern plains, where we could potentially see an additional 1 to 2 inches of free water coming our way. Certainly the grass looking green out there in Greeley and along I-70 up there toward the Eisenhower-Johnson tunnels. The snowfall continues to come down, and we could potentially be looking at upwards of a foot and a half of new snow. Again, across the eastern side of the state, that tornado watch that we did have just expired at 6 o'clock, but we have seen some reports of tornadoes across far western Kansas. In and around northeastern Colorado, heavy rainfall continues to come down, lots of lightning, and then just some good beneficial rain moving across the Denver metro area. Up in the high country, there's that warning. Northern and central Colorado, right there on the I-70 mountain corridor, with the advisory out to the west even further. As we go throughout the evening, heavier rainfall on deck. Like I said, an additional 1 to 2 inches of water coming through. Good news is I'm not anticipating any storms turn severe here for the metro area tonight. As we look ahead toward tomorrow afternoon, 2-3 o'clock, the storm system starting to fizzle out and shifting out of the state. By late tomorrow evening, our skies finally start to clear out. The system lifting to the north and to the east. It's going to be in parts of Nebraska as well as the Dakotas for Mother's Day weekend. Tomorrow we kick off the day, more rain around here, but maybe a sliver of sunshine in the afternoon. The highs will sit in the upper 50s and low 60s for your Friday. It will be a cool, below average kind of Mother's Day weekend. Looks pretty soggy on Sunday. Don't forget the flowers, but the 70s are back next week.
All right. Thank you, Danielle. Mike Johnston's running for Denver mayor on a long list of accomplishments. Ask Johnston about most topics, and he will explain how he personally led on that issue. A closer look at his resume raises some fair questions about whether he's taking credit for difficult successes that were largely led by other people. Here's Marshall Zellinger with that.
I did it in the state Senate, taking on the NRA and winning on gun safety.
The resume for Denver mayoral candidate Mike Johnston is laid out in the Meet Mike section of his website, which includes this. He took on the NRA twice and won.
How did you take on the NRA and win?
It always takes 18 votes in the state Senate to pass any bill.
As a state senator, Johnston voted yes on several gun control bills in 2013, including background checks for private gun sales and a ban on magazines that hold more than 15 bullets. However, a previous investigation by 9 News showed that law about magazines is rarely enforced. A new political ad paid for by supporters of Johnston claims he took on the gun lobby, a claim Johnston himself makes repeatedly.
No one believed we could defeat the NRA, and we did.
But about those gun control bills, Johnston was not the prime sponsor on any of them, though he added his name to a few of them as a co-sponsor after they already passed. He did speak on a couple of the bills before they were voted on in the Senate, and when it came time to vote, he supported the bills.
Voting yes and talking on the Senate floor, that's taking on the NRA.
I think that being able to take a stand on passing universal background checks in a state that had never done it before, and being able to take a stand on banning high-capacity magazines in a state that had never done it before, and being able to be a part of the coalition, a key vote, a co-sponsor, and a key spokesperson, I think that matters as part of the coalition.
In our interview, he used the term coalition often, It's the use of I, not coalition, that caught the attention of Sarah Thunberg.
My team, together with me, created a playbook.
Thunberg is the former head of COVID-19 testing for the state of Colorado, which brings us to another key part of Johnston's resume, COVID Check Colorado.
Probably the way people would most have seen my leadership is if during the pandemic, if you ever got a COVID test or a COVID vaccine, I built the organization called COVID Check.
COVID Check Colorado set up testing sites for school districts to test students and teachers at the start of the 2020-2021 school year. In November 2020, Johnston and COVID Check signed a contract with the state to have open to the public testing sites paid for by the state. Through this past January, COVID Check provided 1.5 million tests at state testing sites.
What COVID Check Colorado did is wonderful. They were a contractor. They did a relatively simple task that we gave them a playbook for. But he didn't create something whole new and manage it very well. And that does not give him the level of executive function, executive management that being the mayor of Denver requires.
Do you believe Mike Johnston is taking credit for something you should be taking credit for?
I think Mike Johnston is taking credit for a thing that my team should be taking credit for.
COVID Check Colorado sites also existed outside of the agreement with the state.
We were delighted to partner with the state. There were places we did work on our own. There were places we did work with them. But that was an idea that we built and launched at Gary and then partnered with the state to scale.
One other part of Johnston's resume is about universal preschool, which passed the legislature last year. In 2020, a ballot issue to fund universal preschool with higher nicotine taxes passed. With Johnston as CEO, Gary Ventures contributed more than $1 million to help get the funding for universal preschool passed. His resume on his website says he led a campaign to pass universal preschool statewide.
When you say you led on that, how did you lead versus the perception that perhaps the governor led on that?
Universal preschool was a broad coalition. There were a lot of people involved in it. The governor was involved, legislators were directly involved, the speaker was involved, and we were involved.
I asked about the governor since he made promises in his State of the State speeches to get universal preschool and kindergarten by the end of his first term. There are more nuanced concerns that I heard from Sarah Thunberg regarding COVID. Those will show up on the web story, which has a little more time and effort to talk about those nuances. But this is really just about when people run for office, and we saw this in Congress in D.C., we got to give a good check of the resume, which sometimes we just take for granted. This resume check doesn't mean everything's, something's wrong. We just want to give it some more in-depth look.
And there's a good number of very informed people who have raised these questions about Mike Johnston's resume. Funny, I didn't see them in your story.
Sarah perhaps went out on a limb. Other people I asked, if you want to give me this information, how come you're not going on the record? And the question I asked that I didn't get a great answer is, do you not want to go on the record in case he wins? You still want to be on his good side? I didn't get a good enough answer for that.
Feels like a smart question. Marshall, thank you. Hey, reminder, 9 News is hosting a runoff debate between Mike Johnston and Kelly Brough next week. I'll be moderating along with Marshall and Anusha Roy. It'll be Tuesday, May 16th, next Tuesday, 7 p.m. You can watch on Channel 20 or stream all the debatey deliciousness on 9 News Plus. It's not called the Marshall-Zellinger Act, but it was the Xcel energy reporting you saw here that led to new legislation today aimed at skyrocketing utility bills. Suncor briefed its leaders on what went wrong at the Commerce City refinery. We asked if the community could see that briefing now. Suncor says no. That's next. You want to know why your next questions matter so much? Because they can lead to change in Colorado. It was your questions that led our Marshall Zellinger to spend months examining how Xcel Energy was pocketing record profits while you saw sky-high bills and you were getting past some questionable expenses by that utility. Marshall's reporting then led to legislative scrutiny. Today, a new law. The law limits which costs utilities like Xcel can pass on to their customers. This means you won't be charged for things like legal fees for Xcel's legal battles, as well as certain advertising expenses. Xcel won't be able to pass along costs for lobbying or political donations either. The law will have regulators, the state's Public Utilities Commission, the PUC, set a limit on the cost of gas that can be passed on to customers. The governor says they left that up to regulators because they're able to respond to changes more quickly than if legislators did it once a year.
It's a hard thing to do in statute because it's dynamic and potentially changing over time. So I think what this is a directive to PUC. I'm sure the legislature, as well as me, will be watching what PUC does with it to make sure it fulfills the intent of the law.
Because the rulemaking process will take some time, your utility bill is not going to drop immediately. No surprise, Xcel opposed this legislation, said it will hurt investor relationships and might cause the company to raise rates. Suncor says it is not ready for the community to see the information it has gathered about the incident that preceded fires, extra pollution, and a temporary shutdown of the oil refinery in Commerce City. Suncor's CEO told investors earlier this week that the briefing was just presented to their board of directors. So naturally, we asked, hey, can the people who live next to the refinery see that briefing? No. Suncor said its investigation is not complete. The company said that it would share some findings with the community at that point. Suncor's CEO was a lot more transparent with investors than the company has been with neighbors. CEO Rich Kruger told investors that the quote-unquote competency of individual operators was an issue with the incident at that plant. We asked Suncor directly, are the operators with the competency issues still running Colorado's only oil refinery? Suncor declined to answer. Is it a protest if you ask for permission? City leaders in Boulder wonder whether they need permission to protest against other city leaders. It's the most Boulder thing we saw today, and it's next. Boulder's police oversight panel is suspending some of its oversight in a protest of the city council's decision to remove one of their members for being too critical of police. Some on the panel wanted to have a sit-in protest, which would be awkward.
How can we get permission to sit in from the place we're sitting in? That's not a sit-in.
They're already there. They're already seated. Again, it's weird, right? The panel's co-chair said several members almost quit after City Council removed Lisa Sweeney-Moran last week. Complaints from the community said that she shouldn't have been on the panel because of her history of criticizing police. Rather than quitting, what the Boulder Police Oversight Panel is going to do is they're going to work through the cases they've already committed to reviewing, and then they won't take on any more. There was a suggestion by legal that they ask City Council to approve their form of protest so that they would not be fired for misconduct. Other people on the oversight panel were like, well, if you ask for permission for your protest, doesn't that kind of defeat the point? They voted to go ahead with the protest anyway. Finish with your feedback next. Tons of feedback on the immigration issue. Joaquin says, how's the city of Denver coming up with the money to provide shelter for the immigrants when they can't provide the same to our homeless? I've heard that a bunch, and we've looked at this, and Joaquin, I can't find any evidence that that is true. I don't know of any services that are available to the migrants that are not available to citizens experiencing homelessness. If you know of an example, I'm open to being corrected on this. Send that to me, but I actually think it's the other way around. There are more extensive services available to citizens and folks who have been here longer term. See you next time.